So fast lap times, that's what we want. I think that there's a big difference between RC racing and any other form of motorsport. And that is that in full-scale motorsport, beginners or less experienced, less skilled drivers or riders go slow. And the reason for that is that us humans have this self-preservation instinct. We don't want to get hurt. We don't want to die. And when we know we don't have the skills to go faster, that limits us. So if you're riding a motorbike or driving a car, you won't be trying to go as fast as the world's best. You won't enter corners as fast as them. You won't do the same jumps as them simply because you don't want to die. In RC, that's not the case. So there's no risk involved in RC. So somehow we all get super ambitious. We think that, yes, we can do this corner as fast as Jared Tebo, and we can hit this jump like David Ronnefalk, when in reality we can't. So because of this sort of mental difference, because we are not in the car, because we're just looking at it, I would say that the majority of drivers are driving too fast. So entering corners too fast, hitting jumps carelessly, not making sure to pay attention to the racing line, stay on line, hit jump straight, and all of these things that we need to do if we want to turn a fast lap time. So the first piece of advice I would have for everyone who wants to improve their driving is to slow down. So slow down because slow is fast. And I'll share a short video with you and then we'll discuss it, because there are two main reasons why I think that slow is fast, and I'll explain the reasoning behind my thoughts. So I think if this session is going to fail, it's going to fail now when I share my screen. So let's see. How you turn the wheel, how you get on the throttle, when you apply the brakes. You can't do everything at 100% maximum speed. You have to be smooth. I mean, when you drive a real car, if you drive a real car, how do you just, when you get to a 90-degree corner to turn into the parking lot, do you go like that with the steering wheel? Do you like slam on the throttle and the brake? No. You probably turn the wheel smooth and get on the throttle smooth. Same thing with an RC car. Smooth is key. There's a scene in a movie that's good for this, actually. Has nothing to do with the racing. It's a blind guy. Al Pacino plays a blind guy in Scent of a Woman.
Which way's the door? Are you blind? Are you blind?
Of course not.
Then why do you keep grabbing my goddamn arm? I take your arm.
So imagine your car is Al Pacino. Okay, so before we take a question from Andreas, I just need to close this point. So Al Pacino, what the hell am I talking about? This is a way for you to remember that the car is blind. The car doesn't know what's coming. So the whole point of that interaction there was that if the other guy grabs Al's arm and starts leading him around, Al doesn't know where they're going. So he'll constantly be surprised and being pulled in all kinds of different directions. You know, and that's not very comfortable. Maybe he'd trip over. That's not the way to do it. So he grabs the other guy's arm, and then he can sense where the other guy's leading him from the subtle movements and the direction change of the other guy's arm and body. So before they change direction, he can already sense that that's where they're going to go. And that's how I think that you should think about treating your car also. Your car is blind. Your car doesn't know what's coming next. So you need to introduce the idea of turning to the car, right? So you don't just go full lock when you want to turn right. You introduce the idea of turning so that the car has time to react and you enter the corner smoothly. If you keep this in mind when you drive, that you try to focus on smooth inputs, gradual inputs, and just the size of input that you need for every situation, then I think it will help you be more consistent with your driving. Whoever had a question disappeared, so maybe they changed their mind. I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake. Someone had raised their hand. So there is a reason why I say that you should have smooth inputs. And the first thing we need to talk about is tires. Okay, so one important thing you need to know about tires is that, well, they are the only part of the car that's contacting the track surface. That's where our grip comes from. And they can only provide the maximum amount of grip in one direction at a time. So that means that if you're accelerating, if you want the best possible traction to accelerate, you can't be turning at the same time. You have to accelerate in a straight line. Then you'll reach this black circle here, which is the maximum performance of a given tire. If you brake in a straight line, and you can achieve the best possible traction for braking. If you corner, let's say you're doing a left-hand corner, then to achieve the best possible traction in that corner, you can't be slowing down or accelerating. You have to be cornering at a steady speed. And if you do that, you can achieve the best possible grip in that corner. If we look at this red line here, this is a representation of a driver doing a lap around the track, for example. So this is actually a good driver because he's able to brake to the full potential of the tires. He's using all the possible grip he can to brake. Then he stops braking, then he turns, and in the corner he's using the maximum potential of the tires once again, cornering. Then he straightens out and he accelerates in a straight line and again using all the grip he can. So he's not pushing the car and the tires too far. So he's not asking too much of the tires. He's not beginning to slide. He's just driving within the performance capabilities of the tires. But the thing is that here, when you look at the line and it's far from the outer edge, this means that you're leaving potential grip on the table. You're leaving performance on the table because what a great driver can do is he or she can blend braking and steering or accelerating and steering. So for example, as the driver stops braking, they start turning into the corner. Then mid-corner, cornering at full potential of tires. But then as the car starts straightening out, the driver starts to accelerate. And when the car is straight, is accelerating at the full potential of the tires and grip available. So instead of doing everything separately, like this red line represents, this expert driver is managing to drive and keep the car at limits of traction at for the entire lap, basically. So braking, cornering, accelerating, driving the car to its full potential, or using the tires to their full potential, I should say. So if you want to be able to do this, if you want to be, let's say, somewhere here where you are exiting a corner, you're straightening out, you're accelerating, then your inputs need to be precise. You have to feel where the limit is, and you have to drive the car close to that limit. So if you have very big, aggressive inputs, then you can't do that. You're going to be leaving performance on the table. You're going to go too far, slide, you're going to correct. You can't drive precisely on the performance limit of the tires if your inputs aren't precise and smooth.
How do you detect the limits then of that? Is that it? So if you were to go over that limit, would you just spin out or something
Yeah,
else?
but we'll get to that a bit later.
Okay.
So that's the first reason that I say that slow down to go fast. So slow everything down. Even though we can't get hurt, that doesn't mean that we have to be super ambitious and just punch it. We want to be in control. So we slow down, smooth inputs. Remember this about tires. They perform to their best ability in one direction at a time. But because we are racing around the track, we don't do one thing at a time. We blend braking and turning and accelerating. Then the second reason I think that you need to remember that smooth is the name of the game. That has to do with this. So do you see a car accelerating here?
Yep.
Okay, so when you drive a car around the track, you can see that the chassis moves. So you accelerate, the rear squats, you brake, front dives. In this situation, the rear has lifted up and the tires are actually off the track. Here you see a car cornering. You see it rolling towards outside. The front inside tires almost off the ground altogether. Here you see a car entering a corner. It looks pretty good. All four tires are on the track. You can see that the car has rolled. Driver is pushing the limit. Here you see a car in the same corner and the inside rear tire is completely off the track. The outside rear tire is almost riding on the rim here, on the wheel. Front is diving heavily. I would say that this car has been pushed too far. So this is the second reason for me saying that smooth inputs are the name of the game, because I would say that there's something called the working range. So cars are designed in a way where they have a sort of limit to how much they can roll and dive and pitch, where the performance of the car will still be good. Now, here it's very obvious. If you are on three wheels, that's worse than four. Okay, you're not going to have as much traction here because not all the tires are touching the track. But there are other reasons too. It's not just a tire coming off the track. When a car rolls, the camber angles change. Tires work the best at a particular camber angle, pretty much vertical, so you get the biggest contact patch on the track. That's what you want when you drive the car around the track. So if you drive the car outside its working range, the geometry of the car won't work as well anymore. The alignments of the tires won't work as well anymore. So now we have two reasons for being smooth. One is how tires work and how you want to keep driving the car at the limit of traction. And then two is the fact that if you're smoother, you can keep the car itself within its working range. Next, we need to think about how you can apply this in the real world. So what do you need to do if you want to improve your driving? You've heard what I've said. I've said we are all driving too fast. We are all too ambitious. We need to slow down a bit so we can go faster. I think that the first thing that we need to do is we need to establish a connection to the car itself. The best drivers in the world, they do this very quickly. And I think for Jared and Robert, this is a bit different than for the rest of us. Because they're too good, okay? And maybe not Robert, I've seen him. Bob. Robert, we call him Bob, especially when he gets to a new track. He smashes everything to bits for 5 minutes, and then he'll be good. So maybe Robert needs to listen to this part also. But anyway, side note. I think that another benefit of slowing down is that now you have an opportunity to establish a connection with your car. First step is to drive consistent laps around the track on the racing line. I'll talk about the racing line in a moment. But to do this, a great way is to put something on the track: cones, pipes, tires, your mother-in-law, whatever, whoever you can find to, use as props on the track. And you try to avoid them and then drive the correct line around the track. Now you will notice that you have to slow down to do this. You have to slow down so you don't hit your mother-in-law at the end of the straight, for example. So a tight line in the corner. That's a good thing. You need to drive slow enough where you can do consistent laps on the racing line. When you do this, you should also think about what you're doing. So practice with a purpose. When I say think about what you do, you should literally think that, okay, I'm braking at this point. I am turning my wheel this much so that I can do this corner on the racing line. And this is at this point I start adding throttle at this much. So you're really thinking about the actual inputs you're doing and where on the track you're doing them. And the reason for this is that when you do it this way, you're training your brain and your muscles, your muscle memory. Eventually, these things will happen automatically. But first, you have to consciously focus on them and practice. After a while, after you have repeated this enough times, have done enough laps, you have thought about these things enough, it will become second nature. It will become automatic. And that's when you can be faster, because your subconscious mind is way more powerful than your conscious mind. None of the top drivers are thinking about their hand movements that they are doing. There's no time for that, right? But when you are practicing, it's good to actually do that and pay attention to what you're doing. So once you have mastered this and you are able to do consistent laps, one very good thing, a really helpful thing, is to hear your lap times. You can do that on any, like the MyLaps software, for example. The app has a feature where if your track has lap counting, it can call out your lap time. And this is a very good tool to use, because when you hear your lap time, you will learn to understand how to go faster. Because very often what we think is faster is not actually faster. We think that, okay, I'm just going to push more, be more aggressive. And very often what happens is we actually end up going slower. So then when we consciously think, okay, I'm going to slow down a bit, I'm going to focus on maintaining my speed on the correct line around the track, then we notice, oh, the lap time was faster, even though in our minds we feel like we are going slower. So I don't know any better way of learning this than first establishing the fact that you are just doing consistent laps on the correct line. And then after that, hearing your lap times and trying to go faster, and trying to go faster in different ways, and learning for yourself that when I do this on the track, my lap time improves.
Yeah, lap monitor is also an awesome tool for this if you don't have MyLaps.
Yeah. Yes. So let's check this video just showing the racing line, and then we could get some input from Jared and Robert about how they would recommend that we all get faster as drivers. So I'll show this video of yeah. So here you see the idea. This is how can I say, this is sort of a very basic standard concept of a racing line. So instead of doing the shortest possible line around the track, you open it up a bit. So corners like this, for example, here, instead of doing 2 corners, it becomes 1 sweeping arc. Tighter corners, you enter a bit wide, exit wide, so you open up the corner a bit. We can look at these sorts of things in more detail later on, but I just wanted to show this because this is a good video where you can see that the daisy chain of cars going around, they are all following this sort of round arc. Okay, so hopefully what I've explained so far makes sense. Now maybe we could get the 2 experts' opinion on how to go faster. Once you're doing consistent laps and you are listening to your lap times, you're trying to go faster. Who wants to start? Jared? Yeah?
I can go ahead and start. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of went over a lot of different topics there. I would say the racing line part is pretty important. I think that there's quite a few people that just forget about like an actual racing line once they get on the track. You know, you kind of look at the obstacles and, you know, they're so worried about doing all the jumps and things like that and braking as late as possible and hitting the gas as hard as possible that they you know forget to really drive the racing line. That video was really good, and a lot of people just don't know the racing line. That's very apparent if you go to like a public karting track or something like that. You know, a lot of people just don't know that what an actual racing line is. So I would say one really good thing that I've always done, and it's more from my motocross background, is I always walk the track. So anytime I go to a new track, um, you know, before I just go and drive, I'll normally go up on the driver's stand, get a view of the track, what I see on the driver's stand. I like to do that first, and then I go and walk it. And then I see if when I walk it, I find something different than what I visually saw on the driver's stand. Because a lot of times you can't see everything from the driver's stand, and things just look a little different. So if you want to better your driving line, better your driving, get some more speed, I think dissecting the track is a pretty good first step. Um, I'll go back to, you know, when I did my driving schools, that's what we did before anyone got on the track, before anyone talked about their cars, before we did anything. We all went on the driver's stand. We kind of picked the spot that we liked, what looked good on the from the driver's standpoint of view. Then after that, we all walked the track. And after you walk it, then when you go back up on the driver's stand, you actually see some things differently. You know, you might have missed like an inside bump or something because you can't really see it that well. And then you go walking like, okay, well, you know, this line you can actually go here, and you can find that racing line better when you walk around the track. And then as far as just the driving part, I would completely agree that most people overdrive, brake too late. And then the big thing that happens is they're always like, sorry, I shouldn't say always. A lot of people are like one step behind. So they didn't exit the corner as good as they wanted. So then they're going to drive in too deep. They hit their brakes a little bit too late. So now they're trying to brake harder. They're skidding their tires, and then they're steering while they're still on the brakes. You should never do your corner entry while you're under braking. You always have to be off the brakes when you do your corner entry, first initial steering input. And so that's a really big thing that, you know, a lot of people also look at pros like, oh my gosh, you know, your car, you can just hug so tight and all that. And yes, we do run. Most of our cars are going to have a little bit more steering and steering just put into the setup, but we're not skidding the front tires. Imagine driving your real car in the rain. If you go into a corner and you skid your brakes, all of a sudden your car doesn't steer at all. So you have to straighten your steering wheel back out, wait till your tires have regained traction, and then you can start steering. And the same thing happens on the track when people brake and turn in at the same time. They lose all their front grip and they just skid. So they miss the correct racing line. So now you're outside where you want to be. You're like, oh, shoot, I'm losing time. So you're rushing it. You get on the gas too hard. Your steering is still, you still have steering input because now your car is understeering. You have steering input, you hit the gas, now your car is super loose. And it's just kind of a vicious cycle that builds throughout a whole lap. And that's most people's issues, I would say, on slow lap time. And that's how you can lose like multiple seconds on you're just like one step behind in every single corner. So, like you were saying, you need to slow it down some, which means brake earlier, get your car slowed down without skidding, be off the brakes when you turn into the corner, keep the grip within the tires. Like you're talking about the grip of the tires. Someone was asking some questions like, how do you know? You know, everyone's going to have that different. A more skilled driver, like my tire limit's going to be much different than someone with less driving ability than me. Because we can push those edges harder and find those limitations. But so when you go into the corner, do your braking, off the brakes, into the corner, roll onto the throttle, you know, smooth, slow, exiting the corner, get your wheels straightened back out, and then you can start building like a racing line going around. And like you were saying, just building some consistent lap times to where you can kind of find your range. And then having practice with the purpose, I would say, is huge also. That's what I do. I never even drive my car without timing my run. I always have a timer on. In the US, most of our qualifiers are 5 minutes. So I always drive with a 7-minute timer. I won't drive less than 7 minutes. And I try to have lap times as much as possible. Sometimes when I go to my local track, when they're closed and things like that, I can't have lap times. If I have someone pitting me, I'll try to have them do lap times. And now I have like that. The name is skipping me. I think that's what someone commented earlier, but I have the little box thing that goes on the side of the track. So you can keep track of your lap times. But that's really important because then you can see that your like out of control lap is probably slower than when you actually slow down and drive the track properly. And then you can start setting some lap time goals. But yeah, I think all that stuff is really important. You know, practicing with the purpose and stuff, not just out there floundering around. And, you know, for me, I've kind of taken my driving always really, really serious. So I haven't really had like a ton of fun at the track. And you have to find a little balance. Like you don't want to be so wildly structured to where you don't enjoy your hobby. But having structured practice if you want to get better is really important because when you race, you know, you can't just crash every once in a while. A lot of people just go and run practice. They don't time it. They don't really pay attention. They're like, oh, well, you know, I crash sometimes, but when I'm racing, I'm not going to do that. And for me, I treat my practice just like a race. and I try to do my 7-minute time, and I try to do it with, intensity, with driving as close to my lap time limit as possible, and then try to do it clean also. So I get used to 7 minutes because when I go to a race, I want 5 minutes to feel short. So that's why I've always done 7 minutes. Um, and then sometimes, when I'm going to big races and things like that, I will practice an hour final. I will practice, 45-minute final, 30-minute semis, things like that, just to get used to the amount of focus it takes. And I think when you time your runs also, it brings that focus part in, which your average person can't focus more than 2 or 3 minutes. It takes mental practice to be able to have 100% focus for 5 minutes even. And then, you want to bring that focus in for an hour is a whole nother level of mental training and really just mental discipline.
So when you say you kind of structure the practice, in what way is it? Are you focusing on like specific areas of the track to get a line different, or is it just basically you're trying to effectively run a race on your own for 5 minutes or 7 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not necessarily trying to work on my lines or anything like that. Normally, when I'm out practicing, especially like at my local track or something, sometimes if there is like a difficult section, like last year, my local track had a really difficult little double coming onto the front straight, and I would make sure like I always try to jump that jump. Like if there is a difficult section, I always want to force myself to do it every time, or as many times as I can, without crashing and things like that. But the structured part is more just to pay attention to your practicing as far as lap times. And then for me, the big part that I would say I would struggle with is the focus, would be the focus part. So that's why a lot of my, I would say, practice training would be on the race time focus, because that's just something I've struggled with kind of, I would say all of my racing is just getting like my mind would get distracted. So if I know I always have a timer and I can't let my mind get off track until that timer goes off, then that's just a good mental training for me. So that's what I mean by structured. And each person's structure might be different. Like if you can't run a race without crashing, then your practice structure should be you set a 5-minute tone on your phone, and every time you crash, you walk off the stand, you fill up your car, and you restart your 5 minutes. And you focus on driving around that track for 5 minutes without crashing. And that would be a good structure. And then, okay, once you can kind of check that off, then your next thing is, okay, I want to better my lap time. So then, you set some type of lap time goal and you try to get under it, and then there can be all different types of structures. It depends on the level you're at and what you're trying to accomplish, but it's setting some goals for when you go to the track so that you're not just mindlessly going to the track and just driving your car. Again, this all goes kind of back to, whatever your goals are for your racing and how much effort you want to put in. So the structure is going to be different for different people.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I think just to sort of reiterate a bit or explain a bit better, the important thing is your connection to the car. Really talented drivers, the ability they have is to quickly achieve that connection with the car. In real racing, the driver or the rider can physically feel what's happening. If they are in a real car, they can feel that they are about to lose grip, starting to slide. They can feel these things. In RC, we are looking at the car and twiddling our fingers. Okay, that's a bit different. There's no physical connection there. But when you are in tune with your car as a driver, you're driving, it's almost as if there was a physical connection. You can feel it somehow. It's your brain that's creating that feeling. But I'm sure Jared and Robert would agree that they have a sense of feeling what the car is doing. So this is the connection that we need to build, all of us driving. And this is what separates great drivers from good drivers. The great drivers can achieve this connection very quickly. So if their car is handling somehow in a strange way, they can adapt and they get that feeling and they can drive it well. Where a good driver, he'll struggle. A good driver needs to get the car into that familiar zone where they can achieve this connection. So for most of the people here in the Invisible Speed course, the reason why I say let's slow down, let's focus on the racing line, let's through repetition build consistency, let's train our muscle memory, let's listen to our lap times and do consistent laps. The reason I say that is when you do that and you do it thinking about what you're actually doing on the track, you will create this connection for yourself to the car. If you don't have this connection, it's impossible for you to figure out where the limit of the car or the tires is. That's what Neil was asking, I think. How do you find the limit? Well, you find the limit when you achieve this connection to the car. So you, in your mind, you know that when you turn the wheel like this, the car is going to do that. The expectation you have from your inputs correspond to what the car does on the track. And you have internalized this because you've driven it so much. So at this point, when you are consistent and you are doing very precise inputs with your radio, then you can drive a lap, you can drive another lap and make small adjustments to your driving. And you can notice that, oh, in this corner, now I went a bit faster and the rear is loose. I'm losing the rear end. Okay. Next lap, you make another small adjustment. You slow down just a bit and now the car was fine. So then you have two options. You can either just know to drive that section in that way, or you can think, I have reached and actually gone over the limit in this section. So if I make a setup change to my car, maybe the car will be better in this section to where I can push it harder and the rear won't get loose. So you have driven well enough in a controlled way where you've identified the limit. Okay? And that's when you can start making setup changes and you can actually learn what they do. Because you have a connection to the car and you know what it does in a section of the track when you drive in a particular way. And then you can make a setup change, do the same thing, and you'll notice the difference. So if you are just going banzai out there, kamikazing everywhere, setup changes, you will not know what they do and they won't really matter. So if you're serious, I mean, I'm assuming if you are spending your time in this meeting and you paid money to be here, that you enjoy this hobby and you want to improve, then I think this is the best way. Slow down, make calculated improvements so that you can create this connection to the car, so that you can understand where the limit of performance is, so that you can start making setup changes because you notice problem areas on the track. And then when you make those changes, you can also notice how the handling is different. I had a question for Robert. Yeah, okay, I remember. One thing about Robert is that, like I mentioned before, I never really paid attention to Robert when he turns his first laps on tracks, but now I know that he smashes everything to bits. And I also know from over the years that qualifying, maybe not a strong suit, but then for some reason in finals, he just turns it on. And there are many finals where he has been sort of mid-pack or somewhere, and then towards the end, he just keeps catching up, and then wins the race. So it's close to winning. Like DNC in Arizona 1 year was like that when he finished right behind Ronnefalk. He was nowhere, and then in the end, he was right there. I think a Neo race, Redovan was similar. There are many races like that. So my question is, how or why can you raise your level in the long finals? Is it something mental or what is it?
Hello. Hello, guys. Just about what you told about smashes and so on, that it just, I mean, not on, for example, really important races and so on, I don't really make huge smashes, or maybe a lot of crashes, but sure, I like especially the first practice, I would say, like to go quite on the limit and everywhere, just to know myself until where I have to push, or until where I can push, or where is the limit about my speed on each corner, more or less. So I have everything like clear, and then from there I start to do my setup, just because I like to arrive to a track. I mean, I do something similar as Jared said about, I go to the rostrum first, then I check the line walking, because sometimes like you see from the rostrum some part of the track that it seems straight, but then you work there and it's not even close to straight. So something like that, it just helps so much on this. But at the beginning, I always try to be like over the limit every time, so I know where I am and where is my limit over there. So then I start to do normal laps and check about if setup allows me to go easier on that limit at every corner. And then about the difference on qualifying and finals, most of the time it's just because I don't push much during qualifying, so it just try to do a pace time, so laps where I'm totally comfortable on that, so like not really pushing, like slow, and not really going, I would say, at 100%. I would always drive on qualifying at like 80, which is some pace I can achieve for a 1 hour main, for example, with no mistakes or maybe one mistake. And then that's why I guess on the finals I can go better and better, because I maybe don't make the fast lap. I never have been a driver that I make a fast lap on the mains or qualifying or a event. But I would say I've been quite consistent from my laps, so that's something good for the long distance, but not good for qualifying, I would say. So on qualifying, it's always driving slower than I could on the limit, and also I usually work on a tire for the long run, so I'm also a little bit slower on that thing. And for example, it happened something similar this weekend at Italy. Like on last two qualifying, I was quite okay on the pace, but I was not really the fastest on every lap. So I was so on qualifying, but that on final, I was quite there. Then something happened with the lap guy and so on. But on the pace and lap time there, I was good, and I had no mistake at all in all final, like 0 mistakes. So I mean, I know if I push more, I would maybe crash. So I like to not to push much and try to make a setup which is a quite fast car, but not pushing at all. But then you have to be really clear in your mind that, for example, to let pass people that it's just going crazy behind you and things like that. For example, in Italy did, but I did also in Argentina when I won the Worlds. I let pass 2 or 3 guys because I had my pace and I didn't want just to overdrive or something like this because I thought my pace was the good one. I always try to go like, for example, if the TQ and so on, it's like one time, I always try to make my pace like 3-4 tenths behind them. So it would be something that for sure would be or win or top 3 in a normal main. So that's always my goal that I want to achieve at any race I go. And that's why maybe in qualifying I'm not good, but then in final it's always kind of top 3, top 5 at every event I go. And it's always the same, like checking a lot the race line and just find the limits really at the beginning, just to know where they are more or less, and then work on the race line and pace and just focus on that. So I think it's the reason, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So I think we
Um,
could talk about jumping a bit. First, before I'd like Jared to talk about this. There's a video of his car doing a jump. I want to hear what he has to say about that. But first, I'd just like to say that jumps are probably where people crash the most. But almost always, if I go to a track and I look, I can see before the car takes off if they're going to crash. And that's a hint for you. So when you jump, pay attention to your approach. If you are out of shape and you think I'll still make it, you won't. Okay, that's that's pretty much a rule. If it crosses your mind, then back out of it. This is again where the self-preservation instinct would be good if it somehow applied to RC, but it doesn't. So again, too ambitious, just going for it. So if your car is out of shape, just back out of it and do the jump next lap. That's going to save you money. If you break your car, paying for parts, save you that, or save you a crash, save you time. You lose less time not doing a jump than having a big crash and a marshal over it.
Hello, I have a question for Robert. Where do you think are the places on the track that you slow down for being more consistent?
The places I slow down, I would say, to be honest, and with the Mayako, I felt way more than the Mugen, for example. It's like the less meters you do, the faster you go almost every time in all tracks. So I would say it's more about this line between the corners, like not the corner itself, like just because of to make a corner like a little bit long corner super fast or just rolling, like not really pushing a lot, it's almost not different. So it's more about the line and the meters you do than more about to go super fast into the corner. And also quite thinking, we don't have a lot of jumps in Europe usually, now more, but not usually. But also to think a lot about which is my race line if I have a jump or not, because it would change. So it's just more about to slow down more into the corner just to have the good really line and to make the exactly meters, it would be the best part where to take care and not to overdrive there.
Okay, so yeah, back to jumping. As I said, the approach to the jump is key. So it pays to pay attention to how you approach in a straight line. The safest way, I would say, the most consistent way to do a jump is if you accelerate up the jump phase. If you're just going at a high speed, steady throttle and hit the jump, chances are the car won't jump in a nice arc. Maybe the rear end would kick up, or your car would take off in a bad way somehow, especially if the jump phase isn't perfectly smooth. So the safest way is to maybe even let off a bit and then get back on the throttle so you're accelerating up the jump phase. That's the safest way, but it's not the fastest way. And that's where Jared and Robert can talk a bit more about how the best drivers are able to hit jumps faster. Sometimes they even brake on the face of jumps to lower the speed so they time it correctly. Timing the jump is key. Also, landing on the landing at the angle of the downslope on power so you can slingshot off the down ramp. These are all techniques, and it takes accuracy and skill and practice to be able to do it. But when you do it consistently, you can gain a lot of time on a lap. So I'll show you this video, and then Jared could talk about this jump. And then I have some things to say also.
I could break it down here. Play it a couple more times.
Yeah.
So I can see it. I don't remember. I'm trying to think of like where that is.
I think maybe Thornhill.
I'll turn my video on too. Can you see my video?
Yours, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's weird. I can't see the video. Oh well. Yeah, so I think that jump is kind of like you were saying, where I'm hitting it pretty fast, so I'm probably breaking the face a little bit. That's why it seems a little bit odd the way that I'm coming off the takeoff of the jump. With how the front is like dipping down quick, and then I'm revving a little bit in the air. So yeah, a lot of times the lap time gained is from like obstacle to obstacle. So you accelerate a lot, like up to the face of the jump, especially if jumps are pretty smooth. So I think I'm hitting that jump pretty fast, braking like into the face, and then I'm throttling kind of like right at the end of it, but my front end's still dropping down. And one thing with me, a lot of people say, like I don't ever really like move my car around a whole lot in the air. I'm not one to do like big, huge whips and things like that, but I always make little adjustments to keep my car flat. So that jump, like right there, he has it paused. My wheels are turned to the left. This angle you probably can't see, but I'm sure the track is turning to the left, like on the landing. You can kind of tell. So kind of like that other video where that car was whipping the opposite direction. So if you see there, I'm turning my wheels in the air the opposite way to angle my car a little bit the opposite direction, so then I can steer to the left when I'm landing, because whichever way you steer in the air, the opposite side goes down. So if you steer to the left in the air, the right side of your car drops. So right there you can see I'm steered to the right, so I'm dropping the left side of my car down a little bit, which is kind of hard to tell there, just kind of from that angle. But my car maybe was coming off crooked or something. So when I steered to the right for a reason, to either flatten my car out or to angle it a little bit, because if I'm going to land with my wheels turned, you can't start with your car being flat. A term that a lot of people use when they land jumps and flip over is traction roll. And like traction rolling is super, super rare, I would say, in RC, but a lot of people use that term. And a lot of times it's because when you jump on most of our tracks, we always have a corner right after our jumps. So, say I'm jumping, I'm doing a double, and then there's a left-handed 180 after the landing. A lot of people are going to be thinking of the corner when they're in the air. So they're going to start turning to the left a little bit in the air, which is going to drop the right side of their car down. And then you land on two wheels. Like this picture right here is a perfect example. But I steered it a little bit to the right before so that I'm landing, flat enough to not flip over. Ideally, in that video, I would have liked to steer a little bit more to the right so that my car is completely flat when I'm landing. But if I was to just jump that straight and I didn't steer to the right, when I steered to the left before I landed, my car would most likely flip over. And, a lot of people would say that's a traction roll. But a lot of times we're making so many adjustments in the air, setting up for the landing. Sometimes mine don't look quite as crazy as like, the bigger width that was in that other video. But it's same type of concept as you're setting up for the corner coming up, and you have to do that steering input the opposite way because it drops the opposite side. So you steer to the right in the air, the left side goes down. You steer to the right in the air.
Left.
I'm sorry, you steer to the right in the air, the left side goes down. You steer to the opposite, the opposite happens. So you always have to do, you have to realize the corner that's coming up. And then when the jumps are really rough, then that's like a whole different, a whole different approach. But for that jump, I think I was just coming in really fast, probably breaking up the face and then hitting the gas a little bit right at the top.
Yeah, I'd like to mention a few things about landing here. So where this is paused is good. So the first thing, when you land a jump, you want to angle the car and land with the car at the same angle as the landing ramp. That's pretty much what Jared did here. But then if you just land, so the car is in the perfect position, you take your hands off the controls, the car lands. It's not going to land very well. Just the shocks will absorb that impact. So the damping and the springs. So what you could do instead is you land on power. Now, when you land on power, as soon as the tires hit the ground, there's resistance, there's friction. They start to drive the car forward. But what also happens is the drivetrain will gain friction, and the drivetrain will actually stiffen up the suspension. So now when you land the same way but on power, the shocks are still absorbing the landing, but the drivetrain itself and the friction in it will also help to absorb that landing. So that's a better way to land. So land on power. Then there's a third thing and a third way to land, which is even better. So here you can see that Jared is landing on two tires, so on the right side. This is a bit extreme maybe, but still okay. When you land like this, what happens is the car wants to roll to the right. So as it lands, now you have the shocks absorbing the landing. You're landing on power, so the drivetrain friction is helping to resist bottoming out. But also the car is rolling. So now the roll resistance of the geometry and the anti-roll bars, that's also limiting the movement of the car, absorbing the impact of the landing. So those three things together actually make for a much smoother landing where the car will land and lose less forward momentum. So it will maintain a better forward momentum this way. So I just thought that this is a good video to see all of these things happen. So braking to get the nose down, angling the car correctly, landing on power on two wheels, and off he goes. Those are the small details that separate the elite from your average Joes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the landing on power is a really big thing that you'll see, like you were saying, more of the elite drivers do a lot. And just for that reason you're talking about, the drivetrain binds up and the car is much stiffer. So, you know, if you're gonna land and you just land off throttle, your car's gonna like bounce off the ground. And you'll see a lot of the pros, if you listen, that we are always landing on throttle. Even if there's like a pretty tight corner right after, you'll hear like us rev as soon as the tires kind of hit the ground, like right before they're going to hit, you like rev, you hit the ground, and then we're off the throttle and we're like onto our braking. But a lot of times you land on throttle for the reason Joseph was talking
I
about.
remember we had this layout for the 10 scale off-road cars on carpet once, and there was this really fast sweeper, and then there was a single sort of halfway through the sweeper. So you'd kind of do the corner, then launch off this single while you're slightly turning left still. And the fast way, I mean, most people obviously slow down for the single and then continue the corner, but the fast way to do it was actually to just launch the single really far down the track and land on flat carpet, right? So also the way you run the cars, they don't really land very well. So that was a section where if you didn't land on two tires, so basically you land on the two outside tires and then it absorbs, you land on power and it absorbs the impact. If you landed four tires, the car would almost always flip over. So it would bottom out and flip. That's traction roll, like Jared was saying. So bottom out, and then the momentum is sort of lifting the car and it's gripping on the high grip carpet, so it rolls. So
that's how I lost the world in 2015, was landing on four tires on that stupid tabletop in the middle.
right.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
But...
So that's I mean, I think for the course I need to find video of that, because that was such a obvious example of how much better the car lands when you do it this way, when you also use the roll resistance to absorb the impact. So you land on two wheels first and then the other two. Just
So it's preferable to land on two wheels in that situation then than four?
Yes, because like explained, it's hard to do because there's a limit, of course. You have to be just slightly landing on two wheels on power, and then the car evens out. You don't want to sort of two wheel for too long. You don't want to land too at the too large of an angle. So it takes some skill and precision to do it, but you want to know the best way to land, then that's the best way to land.
But would you say that that's the best way in most situations, or just when you're trying to get into a corner after a jump? So
yeah, I mean,
because I always try to kind of do it on all four, because I thought that was kind of the most stable way to land.
Any landing that's relatively flat, or the jump is really big where the landing is an issue. So if you have a simple double jump and a very big good landing and you're going straight after, then just angle the car perfectly to the landing and land on power, and you're going to slingshot into the next section, and that's the best way to land. But if it's a big jump with a very flat landing, then it will probably be better to try to land on the two tires on power, and then the car won't lose as much forward momentum.
A question on the braking on the face of the jump, is that to to get it to start leaning in right in the front of the beginning of the jump, or is it just to control the speed to not overtake, or what's the reason to do that? And how much do you brake there, kind of, and how is it just on the face of the end of the jump, or
that's just for speed.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, so that changes any time, and that's definitely a much more advanced thing to do. Like that is a really big divider, I would say. Like, even when you get to like the top level of the pros, is like who can do that the best. Because, you know, when you have a track, like, you know, if everyone's doing the same obstacles, okay, everyone's doing all the same jumps and things, there's no time to be gained with that. Okay, so now you go to the corners, you know, really you can only go through the corners as fast as the car is capable of going through the corners. So then you kind of check that box off. And then the next box is how fast can you go from one obstacle to the next obstacle? You know, obviously you can't hit every jump at full speed because things have to be timed. So, you know, the slowest way is landing one jump, you know, giving it some throttle, letting off into neutral, you know, and then slowing down to the right speed and then accelerating off the next jump, you know, just to make the obstacles. That's the slowest option. So the fastest option is, you know, going the fastest speed you can from, you know, finishing one obstacle to starting the next obstacle. And sometimes that, you know, most of the times that includes breaking up the faces of jumps. You know, sometimes that's not possible, but it's still, you know, then you break before the face and then you accelerate at the face again. So that's just, you know, that's where there's lap time to be made, is from obstacle to obstacle. That's the big difference from, say, like, you know, if you go at a big race from like intermediate class to pro class, you know, if I drive on the track with an intermediate driver and say there's a short straightaway that has 3 doubles on it, most likely I'm going to rear end that person in between one of those doubles, or like into the face, because I'm going to be going so much faster from one landing to the next takeoff. Because, you know, I'm not just doing the speed needed to just clear the obstacles. I'm trying to have the ultimate speed, but also still downsiding the jumps. So then you have to do your timing more with your brakes instead of your acceleration.
Okay.
That's one thing that I can't do to save my life. Yeah.
Yeah, timing jumps with braking is definitely a difficult skill to get down.
Yep.
But I guess it also kind of changes how the car takes off from the jump, right? If you just hit the brakes before on the face of it, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, you're normally not taking off the jump with your brakes on, because, you know, if you're getting your brakes off the takeoff of the jump, for one, you're not going to have a gyro effect. So one thing that you do have an issue when you are trying to brake off of takeoffs is you have to go back to acceleration at some point, because if you take off the jump and your tires are moving slowly, you have no gyro effect. So then your car, a term I use is kiting. Your car basically turns into a kite, and it's just kind of goes, you know, wherever the wind takes it. So if you do break off the takeoff, you do have to give it some throttle at some point to gain your gyro momentum back. And then, yes, there is, you know, if the jump has a kicker on it or something, you obviously can't put your front end down into the face, because then you're just going to do a front flip off the jump. So there's a lot of different technique there for that. Like, I'll use the jump at DNC this year, that middle double jump. Pretty easy, pretty basic jump, not a very far gap. And that's why when you saw the sportsmen and into the intermediate levels, they would endo off of it because the gap was short and it wasn't that close to the corner. So you would come out of the corner, accelerate some, they would have their speed generated. And so then they would start to roll off the throttle, but the jump had a kicker. So then they would just do a front flip because they're rolling off the throttle to set their timing for the jump. When instead you needed to slow down before the takeoff, and then you need to accelerate all the way through the jump to keep your front end up and still have the timing. So that, this technique, it's not a black and white technique. Like every jump's going to be different. Just with how the takeoff is and things like that. So that's definitely a really advanced technique, and you need to just be able to be jumping the obstacles and stuff before you think of that. But that's kind of the last step, and I would say gaining like ultimate lap time around a track is attacking obstacle to obstacle.
Haven't unlocked that level yet. Maybe in the 40 plus euros. This was in Spain. This was a nice section where you had these jumps going around a corner. So it's a perfect video to illustrate this. Here you see that David is approaching this jump, but he's not jumping straight. So the momentum of the car is determined on the face of the jump. He's turning to the right on the face of the jump. So the car takes off, but then almost counterintuitively, he turns left. So he takes off and he's turning slightly to the right. He's going around the corner. As the car takes off, he turns to the opposite direction, left, to angle the car. Now, I'm going to ask you now, why does he do this? So, why did he put the car in this position? It's not just because someone is filming. There's actually a reason for this. So, anyone?
It changes the axis on which he can rotate it with the throttle as well.
Exactly.
So then it can change the direction of the car in the air.
Exactly. So the car is heading right to left here, but the track will be going into the screen here next. So by flipping the car on its side, when he gets on power, it will still do the same thing. The nose will go up. But in this case, up is in the direction of where he wants to head next. So if we just continue the video a bit, there we see that he straightened out the wheels, on power. The car has now turned towards the corner that it's, or the direction that it's going to head in. And then perfect landing. And so perfect that you actually see that he lands on 2 tires, right? Which makes the car land better than if he landed on all 4. We just covered that. But more importantly for this point, he's already heading in the direction of the track. So while this looks spectacular and cool, there's actually a reason for it. When the best drivers in the world do this going around the track, they can gain time by applying these techniques correctly. So learning car control and learning how to do these things is valuable. And you don't have time to think about these individual things as they happen. This is something that has to happen automatically through instinct. You've done it so many times that you just know what to do. But I thought this was a really good video to illustrate this point of how the car reacts to steering and throttle input in the air. So, any questions or comments about this?
I have a question, maybe for David, maybe for you too. Some pro drivers, because I think it's not equal. I had some discussions with pro drivers, and some say that other pro drivers are overdoing jumping. Like, for example, the surname that often comes up is Killich brothers. Some say that they overdo the jumping techniques. But I'm not sure about this because um, maybe it was because this video you showed it's a little bit pixelated because of the stream. But if we look closely, it was not only the steering on the one side because he steered left side, right? I think this person that was jumping was driving a little bit to the right and then gaining the more rotation, because if you jump and go to the left, the effect will be not so strong if you go right and to the left. So I wanted to ask JQ, because for me, when I was analyzing the jumping techniques of top drivers on the world, there are like 1 part, 2 part, and 3 part jumpings. And the 3 part jumping is like basically if we have a landing, and the landing is quite similar like here, so to the right side, the person jumping would do left, right, and then left. I bet that JQ and David know what I'm talking about. But for example, maybe you saw that video because I saw that you were also researching jumping, because I saw your comments on a lot of videos on YouTube by JQ. Like, for example, Robert Batlle has a video about jumping, and his tutorial for jumping is 2 part jumping. So it's basically if you jump to the right, you just do left and right. But yeah, so I wondered when David David thinks about what type of how many parts, like jumping he will take, or because some like so because basic concept is if like on the video JQ showed, like you can just jump, and if the jump is to the right, you can just basically turn the wheels left, and you'll do something similar, but you will not gain the precision sometimes you need to perfectly land, yeah, the jump. So I wanted to know how David thinks about these different jumping techniques,
Yeah, I think.
these rotations. Yeah. You
Well,
know what I mean, right?
Yeah, David, go first.
I mean, I understand what you mean, but to be honest, it's hard to say what I think because I don't. I'm just, I've never thought about any of this. I know that I started playing, turning the wheels in the air with a truggy, actually, like back in probably 2007. Went to the Neo race and I saw Mayfield and those guys were doing it. So that's when I started doing it, just because it was cool. And then obviously, growing up and also attending all the races and driving more, I understood it's a quicker way of jumping as well. But then like now it's just in the back of my head, and it's something that I just do on intention. It's not something I think about when I do it. But to kind of answer your question, I think it's purely down to how the car comes off a jump as well. So like sometimes the face of the jump can be a bit worn out. You have a different corner coming after the jump. Yeah, there's many different things that plays into this. So I think it's just not one way of doing it. I think if there's a track that has 5 jumps, I would probably, do it different 5 times. So it's all down to how the car comes off the jump. And that is basically the only thing I kind of focus or think about when going over a jump section. Is like how, like, I already feel, especially if you see the face. If I see the face, sometimes I I can already predict how the car will come out and what I will have to do next. So I think you have to have this kind of awareness of, and of course experience, and it's not something you have time to think about when driving, of course. So you have to just learn and practice this and do this as much as you can to be able to pick it up and do it on the go, on the fly. But yeah, I think I am pretty good at just being aware of how the car will come off a jump, or how the car is going through a bumpy section on the track or something like this. But yeah, talking about the jumps now, I think yeah, it's a hard one for me to answer because I've never thought about it in that way.
Yeah, I think.
Can I ask a quick question about this jumps? David, if you have a really short jump and you need quick rotation, it's hard to do this with natural nose diving, right? You help yourself to offset, because obviously if you want to rotate the car to left or right, you need to apply throttle. And if you apply throttle, your nose will go up. So on the bigger jumps, pro drivers sometimes don't use braking because the nose will naturally go down after about mid of the jump. But if the jump is short, you sometimes help yourself and apply a lot of brake, so the nose goes down quickly, so you can offset more power to give more power to rotate. Do you do that?
I think it all depends on how small of much air time you have on that jump. If it's a jump which is really low and quick, I would probably not be doing anything at all. It all depends on what height you get out of the jump. So if I feel like I have enough height of a jump, yeah, then I will have time to kind of do the corrections that I want to be able to go as quick as I can. But if there's a very quick low jump, I am not doing anything to the car in those kind of situations. For example, the Portugal track Barcelos last year at the IBC, on the back sections there were a lot of small little rollers and stuff. And over these little rollers, I know that like Illich and also Canas, they were like flicking the steering going through this section. And for me, if you do that in a section like that, it's just a bigger risk to crash, really, because sometimes the car comes out a little bit different, and even if you might flick the steering wheels, but then the car will already be on the ground and the car will roll or whatever, so you can flip over. So I think I was one that really, when I was younger I was probably doing this more. Now I think I'm not doing it as much as I used to, but I'm doing it when I feel like I can comfortably do it without risking anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that, yeah, some drivers like Kanas or Kilic, I think they do it too much and unnecessarily. Like there's not some point to it. It's just maybe habit. But often also, if you just slightly turn the steering, the thing is that then you are determining the momentum of the car. So it's not just you just hit the jump and the momentum of the car, rotation of the car is something. When you do some movement to the car, you know the attitude of it. You are controlling it. So there's also that aspect to it. So yeah. Did we have any more questions? Otherwise, there's just one more thing I want to say, and then we'll call it a day.
I had one question. So following on from what we were talking about before about corners, losing speed before you go into them. So when you're going round the corner, are you basically just maintaining a steady sort of throttle, or is it a case of increasing it as you're going round? Or I don't know.
I think Robert could answer this. He's a Euro guy.
It happened a little bit same like in the jumps. I mean, we have many different corners, so it's not that we have to go on this way at every corner. but
Mhm.
for sure, I mean, on 180s, if it's super tight, it would be easier to just come into the corner and let's roll the car a little bit, not really, I mean, on power a little bit, but just really low throttle, so at least you can have a good speed on the super tight corners. I used to always have a little bit throttle into the corner, like not really leaving like without power, so it's like always having traction in the tire, so it's always having grip and generating grip.
Yeah.
But as fast the corner is, you can throttle a little bit more, but always I try to be like smooth at any time. Like, for example, if I have to throttle a little bit more, but always on the same point, like, or throttling a little bit, not really having a lot of like hard pushing like the throttle, or just leaving without throttle or without braking. So I don't like much to have no brake and no throttle into the corner. I like always to throttle a little bit, but always for sure like as smooth as you can. It will be always the best
Okay. And do you
grip
keep
generator and so on.
and do you keep that? So you go into the corner and let's say you add a little bit of throttle. Do you tend to keep it at that level for the whole, say, the whole
Yeah.
sort of corner? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Into the corner, same like as far as just straightening out the tires a little bit. I just coming to straight and just I go a little bit more, and then
Okay.
until it's like completely straight, and then you go more full power.
Okay.
It's like
Fine.
I mean, like on the real cars, if you go with a pedal like pa, 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 like this, you
Fine.
will be like so crazy into the corner. So it's kind of similar, but yeah, as I told you, like you have to be a little bit smooth,
Gentle with it.
as smooth as you can, for
Al
sure.
Pacino.
Okay.
Always you will spin a little bit, but yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, my last point. Yesterday, I mentioned that I don't think any of us should be copying top driver setups. And now, with what we've spoken about today, I can elaborate a bit for the reason why. Because top drivers, pro drivers, they set their cars up to be faster. That means that at the limit of car's performance, the tire's performance, the maximum potential is higher, but it's a sharper point. The limit is more dangerous. It's harder to keep the car there for an entire lap. You have to be more precise. You have to be more skilled to do that. The ultimate performance is greater, but it's harder to achieve. So you have to be more skilled. If you set the car up to be a bit more easy, so you choose tires that are more forgiving, you adjust your car to be more numb, less steering, less rotation, more stable. For a top guy, he will be a bit slower, so he wants to make the car faster because his skill allows that. But for us mere mortals and 40 plus Euro hopefuls, we need a car that matches our skill level. So we want it to be a bit easier. We want it to be more forgiving. Why? Because we are not quite as precise with our inputs, and our timing is a bit off between our steering and throttle. And an easier car and easier tires forgive more. So we can get away with those small mistakes. We can still reach the performance limit. We can find the limit for ourselves, and we can stay close to it. If we go a bit over it, it doesn't punish us as bad. We don't spin out. Maybe the car pushes a bit. We can regain control. So this is a better explanation for why we shouldn't be copying the top pro drivers' setups. They have a higher skill level than us. Their inputs are more precise. Their timing is better. They can drive a car that has a very high ceiling for performance, but that you have to be very precise to keep it there, performing at a high level. If they drive a car like the grandpa setup that I use, they'll feel that it's too easy and it's too slow. But for me, I'm faster with it because I can avoid mistakes, I can be consistent, I can reach my full potential with that car. So yeah, keep that in mind and forget about those pro driver setups. With this course, the idea is that you learn these things and you find the connection to the car and you start making your own decisions for what to change. And I think that will help you enjoy this hobby and your racing a lot more, and your results will improve.
Yes, good point.
And we have one more question for Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Robert. Can we have your take on a side landings like Jared spoken before about landing on side wheels, two wheels? Do you do that also? Especially on flat landings, hard landings, or landings into the corner to land on left wheels or right wheels?
I usually do a little bit about the external wheels. I would go onto the next turn. I mean, if, for example, after the jump, we have a left corner, I would do a little bit always like right side. So it's just preparing a little bit. But you have to take care a lot just to, when you land, you have to be quite hard landing, or it will just push the side of the tire and wheel and just will flip so easy. So you have to be really like, you have to really want to go sideways on this corner, just pushing so much the car. So then it will just go down and roll down, and then you will have a little bit more rotation to come into the corner, into the left corner on this topic. But yeah, it just, you have to take care on this. I mean, if you're not pushing so much, it will be easier to flip. So I would say to take care on this, and it's higher level skill, I would say. Like, not just, I mean, if you don't jump straight like good, or you don't have the change in direction really inside your mind, I would not start just thinking on go sideways or things like that, unless you want to broke a lot of arms and things like that, which is not really good for anybody. So yeah, I will start like, first of all, like normal, like I mean, go in the jump like this. So I would say like up and down, then start to go a little bit whipping, and then start to make it all together and make it a better jumps and better line. Not to want to make everything together, or you will break a lot of things. I mean, for sure, if we were talking about motocross, you would not do it because you can get hurt. So yeah, if we are racing RC, it's just better to step by step and slow and so on. But I would say for the ones we drive in Europe, I would say before jumping, I would say especially to take care on corners and race line and so on, because we don't have many jumps, and the ones we have, it's not really technical that than people in US have. They have a lot of jumps there and technical. So I would say first take care on corners and throttle and race line, then start to jump better and better. So depending your level you have right now, it would be good to start on this list. And then yeah, if you are okay on the up and down and whipping, then we would start to do like this. I mean, Jared explained it perfect. For sure, he knows a little bit more jumping than me, so I agreed with everything he said.
Yeah, the landing on the two wheels, that's the biggest extreme to stiffen your car to absorb a landing the most. You know, like Robert was saying, that's definitely a difficult task. Like, you know, after this, don't just go and try to jump and like land on two wheels all the time. But if you do watch some of the pros sometimes and say like we're able to jump something to flat, and you know, you're thinking like, man, why do they not just flip over every time they land? If you watch, we're probably landing on two wheels, and that on so flat all four wheels, your car bottoms out the most. Landing on throttle, your car bottoms out less. Landing on two wheels and on throttle, your car bottoms out the least amount possible. So that is what that technique would be used for in like the extreme level of trying to have the stiffest landing car.
And Connie, if you run fifth scale, you fucked either way. So
That's it's always planted. I have a question on landing on throttle. I thought there would be a problem of kind of because the wheels are spinning with force and not just free rolling, that it would actually upset the car when it lands. But that's not the case. That's what I'm hearing here. Or how much do you kind of how much how much throttle do you give?
Settled. I mean, again, that's going to be, it's changing, different jump to jump. Like if you have a 180 or something right after, you can't land at full throttle. A really, really good, elite level driver might be able to land full throttle still and brake, go from full throttle to braking so quick that you might not even know that he's landing on throttle unless you can hear it. But landing on throttle, your car is the most settled. Landing off throttle is more unsettling to your car because you don't have the forward drive and you don't have the bind of the drivetrain, and then you're not really keeping like the grip of the tires either if you aren't landing off throttle or if you're not landing on throttle. Even if you're like a little bit sideways or something like that, if you land a jump and you're a little bit sideways off throttle, your car is going to want to spin around more. If you're landing a little bit sideways and say you're at half throttle, then your car is going to be pretty darn settled, and most likely it's going to straighten itself out, unless you do like a really big steering input or something like that. But landing with some throttle input, I feel like would be better pretty much in every scenario to keep your car more stable and planted and moving the direction that you want to go.
Yeah. And do you give the throttle, is it just in the kind of landing moment, or is it just a little bit before that, or is it kind of, how do you time it kind of?
Yeah, you have to time it because obviously if you were to throttle it too early, then you bring your nose up and then your car is not going to land right. So, if I know I'm going to land at complete full throttle, then I'm going to bring my nose down farther than I normally would off the jump. Like if you watch, like say Ryan Cavallari, I would say his driving, that's really noticeable. He jumps nose down, like he puts his front end down really fast off the takeoffs so that he can always land on throttle. Like mine's probably not quite as noticeable. But you have to do it. You want the best way is to do it just kind of right before you land, because you don't want to just be death driving in the air, and then also you have to think about the articulation that the car is going to have and keep it still in the range you want it to be in.
And if you accelerate up the face and you keep the throttle on, never let off, you can do a backflip. And on that note, we're done. Okay. I don't know if you can actually do a backflip with a fifth scale.
Nah.
You need a special ramp.
I think that's impossible.
Front flip.
Even if
Ryan Lutz could do a backflip with the fifth scale. Come on.
Okay. It's been emotional. Thank you. We had over 50 people. New record, I think.
That was a good session. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
I would Could I possibly add just a small thing?
Yeah.
Just about the I wanted to say something. You're talking about the feeling, and I would say that you have a feeling with the RC. Just I've done lots of different motocross, mountain biking, BMX, karting, full size cars on a track, and you have a feeling with everything, but the feeling points are different. So with RC, I think everyone should have that feeling. You're saying full scale, you have it more, but it's more just fear. Like most people on a dirt bike, they're scared of that edge anyways. So, when they do crash, they've gone over the edge so quick they didn't even feel where that edge is. And I think that happens a lot in RC as well, as people drive so far over their limit that they can't feel that edge. But the elite guys, we are like really close to that edge a lot of the time. So then we can feel it. And that's what makes like our setup stuff where we can notice things so much more than most people because we're right on that edge. So like if when I get close to my edge, if I know like what my car is going to do and then I make a setup change and now it does something a little bit different, that's normally how you make a mistake. And the better people, we're always like flirting with that edge, and everyone does it in all different motorsports. It's just who can react quick enough when they get right to that edge. That's what they said about Marc Marquez, was he was so ahead of everybody because he would just not crash when he went over the edge just a little bit. Like he could save it. And that's, I would say, something like Dakota Finn. He's able to sometimes do just things that no one else can really do because he's able to just save it so quickly when he goes over the edge that he doesn't crash, to where some other people will crash more when they get in that situation. And we have a feeling, like we can feel the car in our hands. You can sense when it's gonna do something and things like that. But if sometimes when you go so over your edge so quick, then you can't feel it. But I just wanted to add a little bit to that feeling part, where I do feel like in RC you definitely have a connected feeling like you do in anything else. You just don't have that fear. You don't have that fear factor like you do, in a real car or on a motorcycle or bicycle or something, to where most people don't even get to that edge because they're just scared of what might happen.
There's a YouTube video, proactive versus reactive driving, feeling the flow, explained, on my YouTube channel. You can go check that out. Okay. Time for bed. It's getting late. It's getting to 11 p.m. here in Finland. I need to get up so I can have tomorrow's meeting for the Australians, New Zealanders.
And what's on the agenda tomorrow?
So tomorrow is a big day. I think I'm actually really going to have to prepare for tomorrow. It's going to be a tough test for me. I need to explain the fundamentals of setup. This is really key to everything. All of you have to understand these basic things. Because then Thursday, going through homework number 1, and Friday homework number 2. And I think on Thursday we also talk about the difference between practice and testing briefly first, and then onto the homework. So yeah, tomorrow is all about setup. So we're talking about all the important concepts, to do with tires, working range, initial grip versus overall grip, those things. So easy peasy, right?
Cool.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and
Great. Thank you. Great session.
see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you.